Lin dies from gold, Yen dies from water, Jean dies from fire. Mysterious revival, mystical revival, 5 elements killing. This world is no longer scientific. Keywords of the novel. Mysterious resurrection, this world is unscientific without pop-ups. Mysterious resurrection, this world is unscientific. Download the complete text, Mysterious resurrection, this world is unscientific. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Women in white clothes and red shoes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Women in white clothes and red shoes. At night, it's exactly midnight. The night market in Xicheng is brightly lit and bustling with people. A middle-aged man, sweating profusely, holding a mobile phone in his ear, rushed into the night market street with a fearful expression on his face. Dr. Zhang, it's right behind me, always following me. What should I do? The middle-aged man walked and spoke, his tone filled with fear. He turned back 3 times at a time and kept looking behind him, his eyes confused. I don't know what's following behind him. Hiss, hiss. Behind the middle-aged man, faint hisses echoed out of thin air. It's like a woman crying in a hoarse voice, or like a woman enduring pain to the point of tearing her heart and lungs. D. For every step the middle-aged man takes forward, the ground behind him makes faint clicking sounds. Blood. Drops of blood red, accompanied by the sound of dripping, appeared on the ground with bloodstains out of thin air. July is a good day. Open the door to pick you up. Don't run, don't escape. Come with me to the underworld. The middle-aged man's ear kept ringing with the sound of a woman humming a small tune. Xiaozuer only has 4 sentences like this, but the words are eerie and terrifying, making the middle-aged man's hair stand erect and his bones tremble. What's wrong with this person? Why is he so anxious? What do you always look back at? Whispers of incomprehension echoed around. In everyone's eyes, there is nothing behind the middle-aged man. He saw, heard, and experienced everything, and no one could feel it. His panic, fear, and shock all seemed absurd. On the other end of the phone, Zhang Qian's willow leaves curled her eyebrows deeply. She is 23 years old this year, standing at a height of 165, with a beautiful figure and high appearance. She is regarded by the world as a successful beauty in her career. She had a famous Taoist priest in yellow clothing from her ancestors. Yellow clothing was worn by the king of the Taoist family, and was the most superior among the robes. This led to her family's generation of superstitions, but it wasn't until her generation that the world changed and she didn't take on her father's mantle. Instead, she went to study psychology and became a psychologist. As a well-known beauty psychologist in this city, she has treated countless patients with mental illnesses over the years. But now this middle-aged man is the most special patient she has encountered in all these years. Just this afternoon, the middle-aged man had already visited her clinic and said a lot of inexplicable things to her. The most eye-catching thing among them is that the middle-aged man said there was a woman in white and red shoes following behind him. But this woman doesn't even exist, don't scare yourself. It's because of recent changes in your marriage, coupled with the impact of unemployment, that have led to excessive mental stress and affected your visual nerves, causing hallucinations in front of you. After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Qian comforted her with an extremely calm tone. Middle-aged men, however, simply cannot listen. Dr. Zhang, what I'm saying is true. It's too scary. It's too scary. I can't hold on anymore. In the afternoon, didn't I ask you to memorize a section of the Taiping Jing? If you really feel like you're hitting evil, just try reciting that spell silently. As soon as Zhang Qian finished speaking, a growl came from her phone and she hung up. Zhang Qian sat in a chair, holding the phone in her hand. Her face was uncertain, and she had no idea what had happened to the other person. Night Market Street Center. Ah! Call an ambulance quickly, someone cut their throat and committed suicide. How scary. Why was this person walking when suddenly he took out a fruit knife from his pocket and cut his throat? At this moment, the crowd was panicked and noisy, and everyone strolling through the night market was stunned by the scene in front of them. A middle-aged man cut his throat and committed suicide just now. While talking on the phone, he walked to the center of the night market street without any warning. Suddenly, he took out a fruit knife from his pocket and used the scariest way to insert it straight into his throat, then cut it horizontally. Blood gushed out like a spring from his broken neck, staining the ground beneath him. He lay on the ground in a pool of blood, his eyes as wide as those of a cow, bloodshot, and his body was constantly twitching. Not long after, his body convulsions stopped, his body stiffened, his breathing stopped, and he completely lost his vital energy. The crowd strolling through the night market stood at both ends of the market, far away from him and afraid to approach. All of this came too suddenly and too terrifying. Even worse, it is an evil sect, and no one knows the reason for all of this. About 10 minutes later, the ambulance arrived. After examination by medical staff, it was found that the middle-aged man had died. Personnel from relevant departments inspected the scene and confirmed that the deceased died of suicide, without any other abnormalities. I retrieved his phone call history and found that before he committed suicide, his last phone call was with Zhang Qian 1 o'clock in the morning. Zhang Qian was alone at home, feeling heavy. Half an hour ago, she received a call from relevant department personnel confirming the news of a middle-aged man committing suicide. As his psychologist, Zhang Qian is well aware of it. The middle-aged man's name is Chen Lin, 45 years old, married, runs a hardware store in Xicheng, has no criminal record, and has not recently formed any grudges with anyone, so there is no possibility of being murdered. She had contact with Chen Lin a week ago. During this week, Chen Lin visited her clinic 4 times to seek psychological counseling. The most recent one was yesterday afternoon, and they only had a relationship between the doctor and the patient. As a psychologist, Zhang Qian has always possessed strong psychological qualities, even though she was saddened by the loss of her patient's life. But Chen Lin's suicide has nothing to do with her, she will not have any psychological burden. What she cared about was that before Chen Lin committed suicide, he kept saying that there was a woman in white and red shoes who had been following him. Isn't this absurd? Zhang Qian has been in the industry for so many years, and this patient is the most special one, and his death is also extremely mysterious. Does the woman in white clothes and red shoes, as he said, really exist or not? What kind of invisible force is driving patients to commit suicide in such a painful way? Did he really run into evil? At this moment, various questions were like mountains, constantly pressing against Zhang Qian's mind. This matter not only puzzled her, but also made her feel very strange and incomprehensible. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Zhang Qian took a hot bath in the bathroom and then lay down on the bed to rest. During this day, too many things happened, leaving her mentally exhausted. Not long after lying in bed, her eyes were heavy and she was about to fall asleep. Hiss, hiss. But at this moment, a terrifying scene occurred. A faint hissing sound suddenly rang out in the bedroom. Then the dressing mirror on the left side of the bed suddenly emitted a faint white light. An invisible pressure poured out of the mirror, pressing on Zhang Qian lying on the bed like Mount Tai. Why can't I move? Zhang Qian was shouting inwardly, and the 3 words, "Ghost presses the bed," subconsciously came to her mind. He he he. At this moment, a tingling laughter seeped through the scalp, emanating from the mirror and beginning to wander around the room. A woman dressed in white clothes and red shoes, with long black hair draped around her like a wild beast, slowly crawled out of her dressing mirror. She first showed her head, but due to her long hair flowing down her forehead, it was impossible to see what she looked like. Then she leaned out half of her body, her neck bent 90 degrees, and looked at Zhang Qian lying on the bed. Bang bang bang. Zhang Qian couldn't move, her heart pounding in her chest. Whoosh! The woman rushed out of the mirror with a swoosh and plunged into the bed, her limbs like 4 spider legs, firmly locking Zhang Qian under her body. July is a good day. Open the door to pick you up. Don't run, don't escape. Come with me to the underworld. At this moment, a strange song sounded in Zhang Qian's ear. Zhang Qian's pupils widened and she felt her breathing becoming increasingly difficult. Buzz. However, at this critical moment, a buzzing sound suddenly sounded inside Zhang Qian's body. Her pupils instantly turned bright blue, and a dazzling blue light surged out, hitting the woman with a heavy blow, causing her to fly backwards and crash onto the rear wall with a loud bang. Before Zhang Qian could understand what was going on, she saw the woman's body tremble and quickly fade away. After the blue light in her eyes disappeared, she was like a deflated ball, so tired that she closed her eyes and fell asleep. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Blue Pupils. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Blue Pupils. In the morning, Zhang Qian woke up to a startled sound. In a moment of awakening, she sat up and reached out to touch her forehead, realizing that she was already a big man with sweat soaked all over her body. Her originally dry pink pajamas were now soaked in sweat. She got up and rushed to the door, far from the dressing table, not even close. After confirming that there was no problem in the dressing mirror, she slowly walked forward and looked at her own eyes in the mirror. They did not turn blue like last night. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Qian thought it was just a dream. Suppressing this sense of panic in her heart, she calmed down and silently stood up to wash and tidy up. Half an hour later, she chose to put aside this strange dream and tidy up her mood before going to work. But this morning, she felt quite uneasy. Until noon, Zhang Qian received a call from the Xiqing Mental Hospital asking her to go over and provide psychological counseling to a mental patient. When business came to her doorstep, Zhang Qian certainly wouldn't refuse. She quickly carried her bag downstairs and drove to the mental hospital. When she arrived at the mental hospital, the dean was already waiting at the door. The dean is a middle-aged woman in her 40s, who is kind and kind. She has a good relationship with Zhang Qian and often invites her to provide psychological counseling for mental patients. Over time, the relationship between the two has become very close. Zhang Qian parked the car and got off to greet the dean. "Dean, what kind of patient should I provide psychological counseling for?" "Xiao Zhang, you need to focus on treating this patient. He used to be the best doctor in the big hospital in our western city, responsible for dissecting corpses and guarding the morgue. I want him to be discharged as soon as possible, otherwise I'm afraid he might actually kill someone. We don't even know how these patients in our hospital died." "That's right, he knows too much about the human body. It's really easy for someone like him to kill someone." Zhang Qian nodded and admitted. The profession of doctors has its own uniqueness. Moreover, this mental patient is also a doctor specialized in dissecting corpses. The dean urged. "Let's go, Xiao Zhang. I'll take you there. By the way, Dean, why did he suffer from mental illness?" "I don't know, when the hospital brought him over, they said he suddenly went crazy one day, muttering incessantly that he could see things that everyone couldn't see, and then he became nervous and was sent over." "Is that so? Let's go take a look and see. I'm really curious about this patient." Zhang Qian was aroused with interest. As a new woman of the 21st century, she does not believe in these nagging things, so naturally she will not truly believe what the dean said. However, she thinks that this patient is very interesting. Perhaps he, like her previous patient Chen Lin, is suffering from schizophrenia and seeing hallucinations. In summary, she really wants to figure out what the hallucinations that patients like this see in front of their eyes are. How did these irrational illusions actually form? It is uncertain that by identifying these reasons from this patient, the truth about Chen Lin's suicide can be clarified. With this idea in mind, Zhang Qian quickly followed the dean to a ward on the third floor of a mental hospital. Enter the ward. Zhang Qian noticed that a young man in his 20s was sitting by the window with his back facing the door, lost in thought. He has a somewhat emaciated figure, standing over 1.75 meters tall, with a short head of spirited hair and a Chinese-style face full of charm. He is a handsome guy. Zhang Qian took the patient information handed over by the dean and carefully examined it before speaking calmly. Hello, Mr. Wang Hao. My name is Zhang Qian and I am a psychologist. I am here specifically to provide you with psychological counseling. Zhang Qian's words fell. Wang Hao lowered his head and slowly turned around. Zhang Qian frowned, unable to see his face clearly. At that moment, Wang Hao's gloomy voice rang out. Beauty, do you believe there are ghosts in this world? Zhang Qian is a psychologist with excellent psychological qualities. Faced with such a mysterious and gloomy man, she was still not at a loss for his sudden words, but rather with a faint smile on her face, calm and composed. The dean stood on the side, but his face was as pale as paper, as if it were Wang Hao's words, with an invisible magic that constantly gave people a kind of spiritual impact and shock. What he brings to people is not only a psychological pressure, but also a mysterious melancholy. Zhang Qian and the dean formed a sharp contrast at this moment. After a moment, Zhang Qian said with a calm expression. Mr. Wang, I am a psychologist. I know you are not a normal person, so you don't need to scare me in this way. I came today to provide you with psychological counseling, and I don't want you to talk like this anymore. If you don't believe it, what did you encounter yesterday? Wang Hao said again. But unlike before, when he said these words, he finally slowly lifted his drooping head up. But just as he looked up, Zhang Qian's face stiffened, her eyes unconsciously widened, staring straight at Wang Hao. Just because Wang Hao's eyes were actually a pair of blue pupils, under the sunlight shining through the window, his pupils emitted a faint blue light, overflowing with a strange expression. How could his eyes be like those of mine that emit blue light in my dream last night? It's just a dream of mine, it can't be true. The dean beside her was frightened by her words. Xiao Zhang, what's wrong with you? What dream? Are you okay? Dean, I'm fine, don't worry. Xiao Zhang, if you're not feeling well, don't give him psychological counseling. I'll invite another psychologist over, don't force yourself. The dean turned pale and responded with a wave of concern. Zhang Qian quickly calmed down, her strong psychological qualities did not allow her to waver. He. Sitting by the window, Wang Hao's mouth emitted eerie laughter. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hospital room began to become strange, with an indescribable and inexplicable feeling, like a flood passing through, crazily attacking Zhang Qian's heart. What she didn't notice was that the woman in white and red shoes she met last night was just an accident that allowed her pupils to wake up. After coming into contact with Wang Hao, her eyes began to emit a faint blue light. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Punishment for Yin and Yang, and Precepts for the 5 Elements. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Punishment for Yin and Yang, and Precepts for the 5 Elements. Easily suppressing the inexplicable strange feeling in her heart, Zhang Qian pulled a chair and sat 3 meters away from Wang Hao, maintaining a certain safe distance from him. The dean retreated to the door and waited quietly. In order to prevent accidents, she specially called 2 male caregivers, one on the left and one on the right, to guard the door. Next, as long as Wang Hao dares to make any changes, she will command 2 strong male caregivers to rush in and completely suppress him. Zhang Qian sorted out her thoughts. Mr. Wang, psychologically speaking, your current behavior fully reflects your resistance to me. You want to scare me and push me back with this, right? Beauty, do you believe there are ghosts in this world? Don't repeat this sentence again. I am a new woman of the 21st century and don't believe in these things that God talks about. Why did your patient commit suicide at the night market last night? Wang Hao finally didn't repeat the same sentence, he just stared at Zhang Qian with a pair of eyes that were full of blue light, questioning her directly. Zhang Qian understands. The incident of Chen Lin cutting his throat and committing suicide on the night market street last night has already spread throughout the entire Xiqing city this morning. Now, it is normal for Xiqing Mental Hospital to know this news. From another perspective, she now believes that Wang Hao is being mysterious in front of her and has resistance to her psychological counseling. To understand this, Zhang Qian was about to speak. But at this moment, Wang Hao suddenly raised his left hand, stretched out 3 fingers, and silently recited in his mouth. 3. 2. 1 inch. Zhang Qian is inexplicable. But when Wang Hao finished shouting and the last finger of her left hand bent down, the phone in her bag immediately rang. Zhang Qian reached into her bag in confusion and took out her phone, only to find that it was someone from the relevant department who called her. She frowned before answering the phone. Hello, what can I do for you? Miss Zhang, just now, another victim appeared in the Xiqing night market. This victim was a homeless man you rescued and sent to the hospital, just like Chen Lin last night. Walking in the night market street, she suddenly took out a bottle of poisonous water from her pocket without any warning and drank it, and then died on the spot. No way, right? How could that be? Miss Zhang, I'm calling you because the people who committed suicide earlier are all related to you. If you have any useful information, please contact us as soon as possible. On the phone, the person from the relevant department explained solemnly. Okay, I need to know what the situation is and make sure to call your end as soon as possible. I'll disturb you, Miss Zhang. You are welcome. Zhang Qian's polite response. The person from the relevant department reminded her a few more words before hanging up the phone. Zhang Qian put away her phone and stared at Wang Hao with bright and lively eyes. What's going on? It seems like you had anticipated early on that I would receive this call. No, did you anticipate early on that the homeless man would die in the night market street today? Wang Hao stopped his strange smile and his expression began to become serious. The yin and yang elements have their own fixed number. According to Taoism, there is punishment for yin and yang, and precepts for the 5 elements. Women are yin and men are yang. Yin and yang converge, causing strange things to arise and chaos to occur. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, 1 precept and 1 extinction, 1 death and 1 evil cause, and 1 evil cycle. What do you mean by that? I don't understand at all. Take me away. I know why these 2 people died in the night market street. I can help you find the truth. Wang Hao did not give a direct answer, but instead uttered such a sentence that made Zhang Qian extremely moved. Although her patient committed suicide, it was not directly related to her. But now another homeless man has died, which is also such a strange way of death. This probably means that the secret behind this is definitely not simple. So now she must find a way to figure out the truth, otherwise she won't be able to work hard during the day and even sleep well at night. But as a psychologist, Zhang Qian never believed that she would be foolish enough to trust a mentally ill patient. You just wanted to show me this one just to get out, right? That was just a coincidence. I still don't believe there's such a magical thing in this world. 3 people. 3 more people will die in that night market street afterwards. You're talking nonsense. The first victim cut his throat with a fruit knife, which was a metal weapon, so he died of cold. The second victim committed suicide by drinking poison water, which naturally belonged to water, so he died of water. The 3 people who died later will inevitably correspond to the other 3 lines. Wang Hao held his arms in front of his chest and resolutely returned. At this moment, Zhang Qian is no longer able to use her expertise and knowledge to interpret the psychology of the mentally ill patient in front of her. From entering until now, Wang Hao has given her the feeling that this person is very mysterious. He said he is a mentally ill person, and it seems that he is not, but he said he is a normal person. He doesn't seem to be either. Anyway, she doesn't expect psychology to explain things that cannot be explained by science. Thinking of this, Zhang Qian made a decisive decision. Dean, you send these 2 male caregivers to escort him to the night market street with me. I want to see what he's up to in front of me. Isn't that good? Mental patients can't be discharged easily. Dean, believe me, let alone 2 strong male caregivers escorting him. He can't even run if he wants to. Zhang Qian stood up and walked up to the dean, determined. The dean still appeared somewhat hesitant. Zhang Qian said again. Dean, psychologically speaking, blocking is better than dredging. Since he wants to go out for a walk on the night market street, I might as well accompany him on a trip to meet his psychological and spiritual needs. This will also be helpful in curing his illness. Alright, then when you go out, keep an eye on him and don't let him run away, so as not to cause trouble when he goes out. The dean only nodded when she heard this. Afterwards, she instructed 2 male caregivers, one left and one right, to escort Wang Hao and follow Zhang Qian out of the ward. 4 people went downstairs and sat in a BMW. Zhang Qian drove away from the mental hospital and headed towards the direction of the night market street. Regardless of whether what Wang Hao said is true or false, she will explore it today. After all, this patient is indeed full of mystery all over his body. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Blood crying, soul summoning, upper body. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Blood crying, soul summoning, upper body. The Xiqing Night Market Street is shaped like a well, with 2 streets horizontally and 2 streets vertically. At the forefront of the main street, there is a tall porch with the 3 big characters, Night Market Street, carved on top. More than half an hour later, Zhang Qian drove with Wang Hao to this place. 4 people got off the car and stood at the entrance. Before they could enter, a gloomy feeling rushed towards them. Why isn't there anyone? Yeah. It's usually very lively here during the day. The 2 caregivers stared at the empty street ahead, trembling with Wei Wei's murmurs. Zhang Qian remained silent, with a serious expression on her face. Last night and today, 2 people died here in a row, both of whom died in such a strange way. Nowadays, merchants are afraid to open their doors and customers are also afraid to come and visit, which is completely reasonable. Dida. Dida. Just as Zhang Qian was thinking this, an accident suddenly occurred. A series of slight clicking sounds suddenly rang in her ear. On the top of the front porch, drops of bright red blood quietly seeped out, continuously dripping down. However, what surprised Zhang Qian was, despite the sound of blood dripping on the ground, the place where the red blood droplets should have appeared was empty. It's like drops of blood dripping from the top of the porch, immediately seeping down to the ground, causing confusion. Dr. Zhang, what are you looking at? You're so engrossed in it. Zhang Qian looked at the eerie scene before her and was puzzled. The male caregiver standing on her left couldn't help but ask. Zhang Qian tilted her head and stared at him. Didn't you see blood droplets dripping from the top of the porch? No. Dr. Zhang, you're not feeling dizzy, are you? How could this be? Zhang Qian frowned and lowered her voice, instinctively taking 2 steps back. Why are these 2 male caregivers completely invisible in this obvious scene? This is simply too bizarre. At this moment, Wang Hao standing in front turned around and glanced at Zhang Qian with a smile. Are you very puzzled? Why can't they see? Can you also see it? Nonsense, this is called blood crying. After a person with extremely strong resentment dies, the resentment does not dissipate and lingers in the place where she often came before her death, resulting in this unnatural phenomenon. Wang Hao spoke up to explain. Zhang Qian is half believing and half doubting. She, who has always believed in science, naturally has little faith in these things. But the problem is, there was indeed a scene before her that could not be explained by science. Wang Hao ignored Zhang Qian's expression changes and suddenly raised his finger to his mouth, hissing. Quiet down and listen carefully. What are you listening to? Zhang Qian has a question. The scenery on Huangquan Road is so beautiful. Come here, I'll leave later. Let's walk together to the Naiha Bridge. The scenery on the bridge is intoxicating. As soon as she finished speaking, a small, ethereal and mournful melody rang in her ear. Zhang Qian's face changed drastically, and she couldn't believe her ears. Her voice was surprisingly very similar to the one in her dream. This is called soul seduction. Whenever you can hear this song, your soul has already been hooked by it. Did Chen Lin have this situation last night? There are many ways in which resentment harms others, but what I'm talking about is just one of the ways we've been through right now. As for your patient Chen Lin, did he lose his life in this way last night? Just try it out and you'll know. Wang Hao gave a shallow smile and didn't put his words in plain. Just because he understood, no matter how much he said, Zhang Qian might not understand and still have doubts. It's better to let her go through it well, and she will understand immediately. Zhang Qian didn't know what Wang Hao was thinking. Taking a deep breath, she calmed down her emotions and boldly stepped forward. Hiss, hiss. But as soon as she took only 2 steps forward, a faint hissing sound suddenly rang in her ear. This kind of hissing is mixed with countless sounds, including roaring, crying, sadness, and all kinds of negative emotions. Zhang Qian was about to reach out and cover her ears. The next second, she was surprised to find that her entire body couldn't move, and apart from her clear mind, she couldn't control her movements freely. Wang Hao turned around and faced her head on. This is called upper body, and at this point, it is the most painful time, just like you are now. You are completely conscious and have a panoramic view of everything in front of you, but you cannot control your body. You can only let the dirt on your upper body control your every move. Is this the truth about my patient Chen Lin who committed suicide by cutting his throat in the night market street last night? At this moment, she could finally understand what her patient Chen Lin had experienced before. Fortunately, as an excellent psychologist, she would probably be as panicked and frightened as Chen Lin was last night. Despite this, her face had already changed drastically and she couldn't truly remain calm. Not bad, so this method, from the perspective of Taoist yin-yang and 5 elements, is called Jin-ju, Wang Hao said again. Jin-ju, the corresponding way is blood crying, soul seduction, and upper body, that is to say, the second deceased also has his own unique way of death, and the corresponding way is different. Zhang Qian's probing inquiry. Wang Hao nodded in satisfaction. You are indeed smart, you can be said to be proficient in just one thing. Surprisingly, there is such a thing happening in the world. The ironclad facts forced Zhang Qian to choose to believe the strange scenes before her. Wang Hao saw that she finally believed it, so he immediately reached out and patted Zhang Qian's forehead. Zhang Qian's eyes darkened on the spot and she couldn't see anything. When she opened her eyes again, she found that she had been standing at the entrance of the night market street, in front of this tall porch, and her feet had never moved a step. And Wang Hao, standing in front of her, was staring at her with a pair of blue glowing pupils. Zhang Qian woke up, and Wang Hao controlled the blue light in his eyes to dissipate, restoring his normal blue pupils. What happened just now? Why am I still standing in place now? Zhang Qian noticed something was wrong and stared at Wang Hao with a puzzled expression, asking. 2 male caregivers stood on the side, both dumbfounded and unable to understand what they had been doing just now. Anyway, since the car came over and stopped at the entrance, 4 people got off the car. Zhang Qian has been standing in place without moving. Wang Hao also stood in front of her, staring at her with only a pair of blue eyes and not speaking. The 2 of them stood like 2 wooden stakes for about 10 minutes. It was not until then that the 2 spoke as if they had suddenly woken up. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Second Dead. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Second Dead. Wang Hao smiled calmly. Just now, I let you enter the illusion I created, and what you experienced was the truth about the first victim being murdered. Is this ability bestowed upon you by those blue pupils? Zhang Qian's face remained calm as she questioned. After experiencing that scene just now, she won't question it anymore. Such strange things have happened, and it is normal for Wang Hao's unique eyes to possess extraordinary abilities. Wang Hao smiled silently and did not explain too much to Zhang Qian, only with a wicked smile. Let's go in and take a stroll. This is just the beginning, and then you will naturally understand. Wang Hao refused to talk much, while Zhang Qian could only keep up. But thinking of all this eerie and bizarre, she didn't want the two caregivers next to her to get involved. Just wait in the car and I'll accompany him inside. Zhang Qian instructed the two male caregivers beside her. The two male caregivers nodded in agreement like a chicken eating rice, afraid that Zhang Qian would turn back and quickly hid in the car. Nowadays, this night market street looks so eerie, and the two of them have died mysteriously one after another. They didn't want to go into the muddy water with them to avoid getting contaminated with something unclean. Zhang Qian followed Wang Hao fearlessly into the night market street. The two walked inside for a while and soon arrived at a garbage station in front of the night market street. Zhang Qian stopped and looked at the garbage station that had been separated by a yellow warning line ahead, her voice and expression condensed. This is the second victim, the place where the homeless man committed suicide by drinking poison. Has anyone from the relevant department revealed to you the specific situation of this second victim? That's not true. On the way over, I sent a message asking a friend who works there to help me secretly investigate. She also sent a copy of the specific information of the second victim to my phone. The second deceased, identified as a homeless person, whose real name is Fang Yan, is 37 years old this year. He has no work record, criminal record, or asset record, and is a typical 3-no person in society. He usually makes a living by begging on the street or picking up garbage. Zhang Qian spoke out the information she had obtained. Is that right? Are you a reliable friend? Is the information you checked accurate? Wang Hao's strange rhetorical question. Of course it's accurate. She works there and is an insider, and we have been good friends for over a decade. She will definitely not deceive me, Zhang Qianxin swore. She won't lie to you, but there are some things that are far from as simple as they seem on the surface. What exactly do you mean? I don't have the patience to guess dumbfounded with you. If you have something to say, don't beat around the bush. Zhang Qian's heart began to feel angry. Wang Hao's concealment and sense of mystery made her very uneasy. He was like a mist, making it hard to resist exploring. However, for psychologists, the unknown mystery of the patient signifies detachment from control and also represents danger. Wang Hao did not engage in a verbal argument with Zhang Qian, just looked around with his eyes raised. Did you see it? This night market street is in the shape of a well, with two streets horizontally and vertically, and this garbage station is located in the middle of the well. Is there any problem with this? A well-shaped street like this has a garbage station located in the middle, making it convenient for people from all four streets to take out their garbage. The layout is very reasonable. You're right, but from the perspective of Taoist yin-yang and 5 elements, this position is called the yin position. Wang Hao's tone is serious. Is there anything particular about the yin position? Zhang Qian opened her mouth to inquire. Water belongs to yin, and this night market street is also in the shape of a well. The middle of the well is called the well, where water is stored. Isn't it because the yin energy is extremely heavy? When homeless people are in the well, they are surrounded by the extremely heavy yin energy, and naturally cannot escape. Is this his way of dying? What I'm telling you is just the principle behind his murder. As for how he died, why don't you experience it firsthand? Wang Hao smiled with a wicked charm and said this sentence. After speaking, he turned around and faced Zhang Qian directly, with a pair of eyes fixed on her, trying to pull her into a fantasy and let her experience the way a homeless person dies. Zhang Qian waved her hand and pushed him away. I'm telling you, I really don't like your move. Please try a different way for me to understand. Hiss, hiss. As soon as Zhang Qian finished speaking, the same hoarse growls as before suddenly rang out in her ear. Are you still here? Zhang Qian thought it was Wang Hao's old trick and asked coldly. Wang Hao took a step back. This time has nothing to do with me. So. Before Zhang Qian could finish speaking, a piercing chill suddenly rose around her body. Then a powerful yin qi rushed towards her with lightning speed. Zhang Qian's pupils tightened, instinctively sensing a hint of danger. But the next second, she was stunned. No, it should be a scene that made her feel tearful, it appeared. I saw that the sudden attack of yin qi twisted and transformed into her deceased grandfather in an instant, standing in front of her with a kind smile. Her grandfather's name is Zhang Tianzheng, and he was very famous in the entire circle of Taoist priests in the land of China during his lifetime. Zhang Qian was raised by her grandfather since she was young. In her memory, her grandfather was just an ordinary little old man. The difference is that her grandfather would disappear for a period of time, and every time she returned, people would become even thinner. As she grew older, the frequency of disappearance also increased. Later on, Grandpa let her parents pick her up, as if there was no time left to take care of her. However, not long after she left, her grandfather passed away. She didn't see his last glance, and when she returned to her hometown, she only saw his body. She will never forget the last scene of seeing her grandfather's body. Her grandfather, who was in his 50s, was like a dead bone, completely devoid of flesh and blood, only wrapped in a layer of skin. Watching her grandfather suddenly appear in front of her, Zhang Qian's eyes unconsciously began to become moist. Qian, be good, don't cry. Follow Grandpa, Grandpa will take you home. Zhang Tianzheng leaned out his right hand and affectionately touched the melon seeds in her cerebellum, speaking in an extremely spoiled voice in her ear. Zhang Qian originally wanted to resist, but at this moment she realized that she seemed to be possessed by a demon. Not only did she not resist Grandpa's indulgence, but she was also extremely eager to cooperate with him and not want to be stubborn in front of him. She was very certain that her mind was clear at the moment and she understood that her grandfather had passed away long ago. The person in front of her absolutely did not exist in reality. But the problem lies here. She couldn't resist her grandfather's sudden indulgence. Just as Zhang Qian was about to lose herself in this feeling, Wang Hao standing over there moved. He placed his hands on his chest, tied strange knots, and silently recited in his mouth. Heaven and earth have no limits, the Tao is natural, the yin and yang 5 elements, unbreakable and indestructible, illness. After the spell fell, Wang Hao aimed at Zhang Tianzheng and slapped his right palm, making a loud scream. Break it. Buzz. As he shouted loudly, a piercing buzzing sound exploded. Zhang Tianzheng, who had just stood in front of Zhang Qian, was immediately blown apart and quickly dissipated into the air. Hooking. At this moment, Zhang Qian took a deep breath of fresh air, feeling her body relaxed and her whole body much more comfortable. She no longer had the extreme sense of disharmony that she had just felt unwilling but unable to resist. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Gathering Yin, Illusion, and Charm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Gathering Yin, Illusion, and Charm. Why is this happening? After more than a minute, Zhang Qian finally calmed down and asked, panting heavily. It is your own body that has been contaminated with unclean yin energy that causes this gathering yin phenomenon. Have you forgotten the female ghost you met yesterday? You wouldn't still naively think it was a dream now. You. Zhang Qian was angry, but unable to refute. She took a deep breath and continued to ask, why is Fang Yan's death method different from Chen Lin's? According to the Taoist theory of yin-yang and 5 elements, the second deceased, Fang Yan, died of water difficulty. He also experienced the same gathering yin phenomenon before his death. How do you explain this scene just now? Zhang Qian has a question. Wang Hao glanced at her. Everyone has 7 emotions and 6 desires. Just now, your grandfather appeared in front of you because of the thoughts and regrets you had for him in your mind. These 2 emotions have transformed into a phantom. When my grandfather passed away, I didn't make it back in time to see him for the last time. This is indeed the biggest regret of my life. After all, he raised me on his own, and he is also the closest person to me. Zhang Qian sighed and felt that there would always be some regrets in one's life that she could never make up for after exhausting her entire life. Did you just say that although you were unwilling, you couldn't resist that feeling at all? Wang Hao did not argue and asked very seriously. Zhang Qian remained silent as a sign of agreement. Wang Hao immediately explained. This is called charm. I understand now. The death of the second deceased Fang Yan corresponds to the water difficulty line in the 5 elements, and the way of death for water difficulty is to gather yin, illusion, and charm, right? Not bad. Before he died, there must have been a person in front of him who could only be seen by himself, but not by anyone else. It was this person's charm that made him drink the poison and die on the spot. Wang Hao gave a highly affirmative answer. Zhang Qian's face stiffened and she felt lost in thought. Regardless of whether what Wang Hao said is true or false, just talking about the relevant departments alone will definitely not believe this investigation result. Both victims also belong to typical suicides, and there is no killer to speak of. In this situation, she definitely can't just foolishly rush to the relevant department and reveal the truth about the deaths of these 2 deceased people. Wang Hao noticed that Zhang Qian was not speaking, so he reminded him in a timely manner. Dr. Zhang, I advise you to pay attention to safety. I have a plan in my heart, you don't need to say much. Now that I've helped you find the truth, shouldn't you also do me a favor? Wang Hao changed his tone and suddenly said. What are you busy with? Please provide me with a mental health certificate, inform the dean that I have returned to normal, and help me leave the mental hospital. If you help me catch the culprit, I'll open it for you. Zhang Qian came up with such a cunning sentence. Before the first victim Chen Lin committed suicide last night, I called her and said there was a woman in white and red shoes chasing after her. At the same time, she had a nightmare last night, and this woman in white and red shoes also came to trouble her. She is not a fool, so naturally she can understand that this woman in white and red shoes must be the real culprit behind these 2 death cases. She can't catch this woman, Wang Hao definitely can. Unexpectedly, Wang Hao refused at once. No, what I promised you is just to help you uncover the truth. As for the matter of catching the vengeful spirit, it's none of my business. Resentment spirit, as you said, is the dirty thing formed when a person with extremely strong resentment dies and their resentment does not dissipate. Yes, this thing is very difficult to deal with. You should have a deep understanding of it, so I don't want to trouble. Wang Hao spread his hand and said it was not beneficial to get involved. Zhang Qian has a strong personality, how could she easily bow down to him? Okay, do as you please. If you don't want to help me catch her, don't expect me to help you leave the mental hospital. Sure, it's okay for me to stay for a while longer, but I just hope you don't come and ask me to help you with the discharge. Humph. You seem to be crazy, you don't understand my family background. Zhang Qian snorted coldly, disdainful of Wang Hao's statement. Her ancestors came from a Taoist background. When she was young, she was not interested in these mysterious gods, and her family never discussed them in front of her, so she didn't know much about them. When I grew up and went to college, I even sneered at this system, so I didn't inherit the legacy of my ancestors. However, this time is different from the past. Although their lineage has not inherited the legacy of their ancestors, there is always someone among her many relatives who has inherited the legacy of their ancestors. In this case, even if she doesn't seek help from Wang Hao, she can still seek help from her relatives at home. Therefore, Zhang Qianzhen didn't want to talk nonsense to this lunatic anymore. He reached out and grabbed his arm, pulling him out of the night market street and back to the mental hospital in the car. Wang Hao did not resist throughout the journey. After sitting in the car, his blue eyes stared straight through the window at the tall corridor of the night market street, and a strange smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Return to the mental hospital. After Zhang Qian handed Wang Hao over to the dean and locked him in the ward, she said to the dean. Dean, please send someone to keep an eye on him and don't let him run out. Although he may be nervous, he seems to have some skills. If he runs out and harms others, he may be in big trouble. I know Xiao Zhang, go ahead and get busy with your affairs. He has entrusted it to me. The dean replied with a frightened expression on his face. Zhang Qian nodded quietly, got in the car, left the mental hospital, and returned to her workplace. At 5 p.m., the day's work ends. Zhang Qian tidied up her desk, handed over trivial matters to her assistant, and then left the company to drive back home to rest. In the evening, after dinner, she sat in the living room watching TV, took out her phone, dug out the number of her second grandfather Zhang Tianda, and called him. Zhang Tianda, the younger brother of Zhang Tianzheng, the grandfather of Zhang Qian. Since Zhang Tianzheng's death, he has become the oldest member of the Zhang family. Among the entire Zhang family, he has the highest seniority and highest prestige. He, who is almost 60 years old this year, still follows the lifestyle of a Taoist and lives a lively and carefree life. The phone was connected, and Zhang Qian quickly said hello. Grandpère, how have you been lately? Damn girl, you've always been climbing the Three Treasures Hall for nothing. Tell me, why are you looking for my old man again this time? Second grandpa, Jiang is still old and spicy. I haven't even spoken yet, you already know. Zhang Qian rarely showed her little daughter's demeanor and acted coquettishly in front of her second grandfather. Don't give me any intoxicating soup. Tell me, what's up with finding second grandpa? Zhang Tianda doted on Zhang Qian and asked curiously. Second grandpa, you are the last Taoist in our Zhang family to inherit our ancestors' legacy. I would like to invite you. Doodle doodle. Before Zhang Qian could finish speaking, there were suddenly beeps of calls ending on her phone. Zhang Qian had not yet realized what was going on, and waves of electric current hissing echoed in the living room. Immediately after, the lights in the living room flickered and flickered. The smart TV on the wall opposite her suddenly disappeared and a dense white snowflake appeared. The atmosphere in the room suddenly became eerie and eerie. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Strange Scenes in Television. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Strange Scenes in Television. Zhang Qian's face stiffened, with a hint of ominous premonition in her heart. Slowly standing up, she clenched her phone in her hand and looked around with her eyes raised. In this flickering environment, her black pupils slowly turned blue, and a faint blue light began to overflow from her pupils. Is that you? We have no grievances or grudges, why are you making things difficult for me like this? After a moment of contemplation, Zhang Qian shouted coldly in the living room. Buzz. A piercing buzzing sound immediately sounded in vain in the living room. Zhang Qian's eyes froze as she quickly focused on the TV across from her. At this moment, the white snowflakes flooding the TV have dissipated, replaced by eerie scenes. This picture shows a basement. A woman in her 30s, dressed in white pajamas with long black hair draped around her, was huddled in a corner, trembling and tired. Her white pajamas were stained red with blood in many places. Her body was also bruised and purple, and there was even a blood-red scar on her chest, with blood dripping from the scar. What a pity, what's going on here? Zhang Qian stared and spoke out in sorrow, feeling that this woman was very unfortunate and had a difficult fate. In her heart, there was more sympathy and pity for her. Zhang Qian unconsciously walked up to the TV, bent down, and stared at the eerie scene with her eyes fixed on it. She felt like she was getting into the TV. He yang yang, the sun rises in the east. I am writing now, with 10,000 ghosts hidden in my possession. According to my decree, I have ordered the execution to be unknown. The Supreme Lord is in a hurry like a law. The Taoist spell sounded, accompanied by a piercing and mournful sound, and the flickering lights in the living room instantly returned to normal. The TV, which was originally playing eerie visuals, has also returned to normal. Zhang Qian still stood in front of the TV, her eyes fixed on the screen like a fool, staying in place. Qian, when you talk, have you encountered something unclean? Zhang Qian was still in a daze and had not regained her senses. In the phone that fell behind her on the ground, the call of her second grandfather, Zhang Tianda, rang out again. Zhang Qian quickly withdrew from her daze, turned around and picked up the phone on the ground, pretending to be calm and replied. Second grandpa. Maybe the signal was not good just now. Fart, if it weren't for me casting a spell from afar just now, do you think the call would recover so quickly? Can you talk to me so clearly? Second grandpa, you're really amazing. Zhang Qian couldn't help but admire in her heart. You dead girl, how did I tell you to learn more from the skills of our old Zhang family when you have nothing to do? You've been talking about feudal dross all along, now it's okay. Second grandpa, isn't my hair long and my knowledge short? I will definitely study hard in the future. Zhang Qian also regretted it for a while. She had lived for more than 20 years and had never encountered such a strange thing. Who would believe that this world is really eerie? I'll take a plane over now. Remember before I came, you took out the book I gave you, the Taiping Jing. Not only did you have to open it carefully, memorize the scriptures, and recite them at any time, but you also had to keep it by your side at all times. Did you hear me? Zhang Tianda solemnly instructed. Zhang Qian nodded repeatedly. Hanging up the phone and looking at the brief call duration of less than a minute on her phone, Zhang Qian was taken aback. She clearly felt that it had been a long time. Without much thought, she quickly ran to the study and began rummaging on the bookshelf. When Zhang Tianda gave her the Taiping Jing before, she felt that her second grandfather was superstitious and did not speak scientific reasoning at all, so she did not attach much importance to this scripture. So she casually placed it in the corner of the bookshelf in the study, never really taking it seriously and carefully. Until now, with more and more strange things happening, she finally took this scripture seriously. After searching for a while, Zhang Qian finally found the dusty Taiping Jing in the lower right corner of the bookshelf. Hiss. As she reached out to pick up the Taiping Sutra, a slight hissing suddenly flashed in her ear. Then she suddenly felt that wherever her eyes passed, they began to become clearer than ever before, and her entire head no longer had the feeling of being top-heavy in light. It's really amazing. Holding the Taiping Jing in her hand, Zhang Qian couldn't help but mutter to herself. As she finished speaking, she reached out and dusted off the dust from the scriptures, flipping open the ancient and yellowed pages of the scriptures. Zhang Qian opened the first page, and these 4 annotations were prominently presented before her eyes. The yin-yang and 5 elements, the 8 trigrams and the Book of Changes, create restless and chaotic minds, and lead to restless and strange behaviors. Looking at these 4 annotations, Zhang Qian could understand the literal meaning, but she couldn't explain the deeper meaning for a while. Never mind, first follow Grandpa Ayre's instructions and recite the scriptures carefully. Then, just ask him to help me explain. Without further thought, Zhang Qian muttered to herself. Then she left the study with the Taiping Sutra, went to the bedroom with her back against the bedside, and began to read and memorize the scriptures. After reciting the scripture for a while, Zhang Qian was so tired that she couldn't bear it. She placed the scripture under her pillow and slept on it. It's strange to say so. That night, she fell asleep with her scriptures on her pillow. Not only did she not have any nightmares, but she also slept soundly. The next morning, when Zhang Qian woke up, she felt refreshed and full of energy. This made her even more aware of the remarkable aspects of this scripture. However, Zhang Qian's good mood did not last long. As soon as she finished washing up in the bathroom and came out, her good friend Huang Shanshan, who works in the relevant department, urgently called her. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Wooden Stick Barbecue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Wooden Stick Barbecue. Picking up the phone, Zhang Qian asked. Sugiyama, why did you call me so early? Come over to the night market street, I need your help if I have anything. What's wrong? What happened again? Zhang Qianxiu's eyebrows furrowed, and a hint of bad premonition arose in her heart. Yesterday, Wang Hao's mental illness told her that 3 more people would die in the night market street. Originally, she was still somewhat skeptical, but judging from the current situation, it seems that Wang Hao has really hit the nail on the head. Huang Shanshan appeared somewhat anxious. You come over and talk, I don't know how to describe it to you on the phone. Is it so strange? Zhang Qian has a question. Huang Shanshan hung up the phone and didn't have time to talk to her anymore. Zhang Qian put away her phone, tidied up her bag, picked up the book Taiping Jing under her pillow, put it in her bag, and then hurriedly left the door. She then drove quickly to the night market street. After more than half an hour, Zhang Qian drove to the tall corridor outside the night market street. At this point, several cars from the relevant departments had already parked at the entrance. Huang Shanshan was standing under the porch waiting for her at this moment. The two met, and Huang Shanshan hurriedly reached out to take Zhang Qian's hand and walked inside. Zhang Qian asked as she walked. Sujijai, what exactly happened? In the morning, we received a report from a barbecue restaurant owner on this night market street, claiming that his shop had died. After we came to block the scene, the owner collapsed. That's why I called you and asked you to come and help him with some psychological counseling to avoid any accidents. The two of them didn't speak anymore, so they quickened their pace and rushed to the barbecue restaurant deep in the night market street. The barbecue restaurant where the deceased died, named Couple Happiness Barbecue, is owned by a young couple and is located at the west end of Night Market Street, in a relatively good location. When Zhang Qian followed Huang Shanshan over, the barbecue restaurant had already been set up with a yellow warning line. The owner of the barbecue restaurant is a middle-aged fat man who is about 1.75 meters tall. At this moment, he is slumped on a chair outside, looking listless and scared to the point of turning pale and trembling all over. Even to the point where his eyes were bloodshot and red, as if he was about to burst into tears. Zhang Qian didn't rush forward to comfort her, but turned around and looked inside the barbecue restaurant. But at this sight, her face turned pale on the spot, and she felt a sensation in her stomach, almost spitting out the overnight meal she had eaten last night. Just because of the barbecue restaurant at this time. A man was being punctured by a long stick from his mouth and put on the grill like a roast suckling pig. This grill is a large grill used to cook roast suckling pig and whole sheep in the usual barbecue shop. As long as you put things on the grill and put charcoal in the lower slot, you can quickly make barbecue. This scene really makes people feel terrifying and disgusting just thinking about it. Nausea. Soon, Zhang Qian couldn't bear the nausea and ran to the side, holding onto the trash can. She lowered her head and opened her mouth, spitting it out. Huang Shanshan quickly brought a bottle of mineral water, handed it to Zhang Qian, and reached out to pat her back. Zhang Qian vomited for a while and felt more comfortable in her stomach. She then straightened her waist and poured a few drops of water into her mouth. Huang Shanshan's face turned extremely pale. Do you now know why the barbecue restaurant owner is on the brink of collapse? Have you found any clues about the killer? Speaking of which, the monster is here. Huang Shanshan frowned, and a big question mark had already appeared on his face. Zhang Qian asked after me. What kind of strange method? We checked the surveillance footage and found that the deceased had quietly arrived around 4 a.m. last night. When he arrived, he went straight to the barbecue restaurant and broke through the window. And then what? And that's it. After he broke through the window and entered, the surveillance cameras inside the shop were shut down and nothing was captured. It wasn't until the barbecue restaurant owner came over in the morning to clean up the shop that we saw this scene. Then he reported the incident and we rushed over to block the scene. Huang Shanshan explained the specific situation once. Zhang Qian remained silent, her mind already linking this matter to the woman in white clothes and red shoes. But before the truth was revealed, she dared not speak recklessly and was afraid that Huang Shanshan would not believe it. Huang Shanshan said again. The strangest thing is that we just went in to inspect the scene, and there were no signs of fighting or homicide inside. It was like the deceased stabbed themselves through and then put them on a barbecue grill. Sugiyama, do you believe there are ghosts in this world? Do you want to tell me that he was killed by a ghost? Huang Shanshan looked incredulous, thinking that Zhang Qian was joking with her. Zhang Qian knew that talking too much was useless, so she could only quickly shift the topic. Sugiyama, I suggest you go find a Taoist or monk to help you take a look. It's better to believe in the existence of this thing than to believe in its absence. Alright, stop joking. Go and help the barbecue restaurant owner with some psychological counseling, so that he won't collapse and cause trouble again in a while. Huang Shanshan didn't take Zhang Qian's words seriously at all, just kept urging her. Zhang Qian shook her head helplessly and could only walk towards the barbecue restaurant owner sitting there paralyzed. She began to provide him with psychological counseling and soothe his almost collapsed emotions. After more than an hour, the owner of the barbecue restaurant's mood stabilized. Zhang Qian has completed her work and is ready to leave. Hiss. But just then, something unexpected happened. Zhang Qian suddenly heard a piercing hissing sound in her ear, and then she felt her head heavy. Her eyes turned black, and she fell unconscious and couldn't stand up. Her tightly closed eyes kept fluctuating up and down, as if a person had a nightmare after falling asleep. When Zhang Qian opened her eyes again, she was surprised to find herself in a dimly lit basement. She was wearing a white nightgown stained red with blood. She still has countless scars of all sizes on her body, the most serious of which is the scar on her chest, constantly oozing blood out. She was tired and huddled in a corner of the basement, disheveled and unbearable. This is actually the basement in the TV footage last night. I turned into that woman who was brutally beaten up in the picture. Looking at the scene before me, I feel the intense pain emanating from my body. Zhang Qian almost spoke out this strange fact word by word. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. More and More Mysteries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. More and More Mysteries. Zhang Qian hasn't figured out what's going on yet. Her eyes began to change from black to blue, and her pupils began to flood with faint blue light. Looking around again, within reach, she was even more confident that she was right. This is the eerie basement that was shown in the eerie TV footage last night. She somehow turned into that ugly woman. Pop 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 pop. At this moment, the sound of whips hitting the ground suddenly exploded in Zhang Qian's ear. Zhang Qian looked up and saw a man holding a bloody whip, whipping the ground while smiling grimly as he walked towards her. Bastard, I'll beat you to death. Pop 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 pop. Walking not far in front of Zhang Qian, the man let out a roar and swung his bloody whip, hitting her fiercely. Ah ah ah. Zhang Qian was beaten and screamed in agony. Every time the whip falls on her, a piercing pain will invade her whole body. Zhang Qian wanted to resist and curse loudly. But in this excruciating pain, she couldn't stand up at all, and she didn't have the strength to curse anymore. She could only curl up in the corner like the woman in the TV scene last night, trembling in pain. I don't know how many hits she received, but Zhang Qian felt like she couldn't hold on anymore, her consciousness was blurry, and she was about to faint. But she knew she couldn't faint, and the sixth sense in her mind told her that if she fainted, she might never wake up again. Zhang Qian gritted her teeth and struggled to support herself, struggling to think of a way to escape from here in her mind. She understood that it must have been the residual yin energy in her body that caused the backlash. Last time, it was thanks to Wang Hao's intervention that she was able to get out of the predicament. Unfortunately, that mental illness is not here this time, and Grandpa Air has not arrived either. Second Grandpa. Thinking of Second Grandpa, Zhang Qian's mind suddenly became clear, and the things Second Grandpa had always emphasized to bring came to mind too. Ping. Jing. Ha. On a bench not far from the barbecue restaurant. Zhang Qian suddenly woke up with a loud gasp. Qian, are you okay? Huang Shanshan saw that she was awake and quickly approached to inquire. What happened just now? After providing psychological counseling to the barbecue restaurant owner, you got up and was about to leave when suddenly you fainted on the ground. No matter how I called you, I couldn't wake you up, so I had to help you lie down on this bench and give you a good rest. Huang Shanshan looked anxious, and her best friend's sudden fainting was frightening her. Zhang Qian quickly stood on the ground and began to check her physical condition. She found that she was still wearing the professional women's outfit she had worn before going out in the morning, not the white pajamas stained red with blood. And just now she was beaten so much that she should have been covered in scars, but now she doesn't have any wounds on her body. I was indeed dreaming just now. Zhang Qian murmured to herself with a solemn expression on her face. Qian, I know you're tired from work, but you still need to rest well. Your body is the capital of your struggle. You can't faint from exhaustion like this anymore. Huang Shanshan quickly expressed concern. Sugiyama, I had a very strange dream just now, in which I became someone else. Alright, don't nag all day long. You used to only believe in science and wouldn't say these nonsense. But Zhang Qian is preparing to explain. At that moment, personnel from the relevant department carried the body of the deceased and walked out of the barbecue restaurant. Zhang Qian looked up carefully at the deceased's appearance, her face darkened on the spot, and her words abruptly came to an end. Just now, in her dream, the man who kept whipping her with a whip looked exactly like the dead man in front of her. Turning her gaze back, Zhang Qian stared at Huang Shanshan and asked. Sugiyama, can you tell me the detailed information of this deceased person? What do you want? I have many friends, let me know the detailed information of the deceased. Maybe I can help you find clues. Zhang Qian found a reason. The deceased's name is Zhang Pe, who is 45 years old this year and runs a hotel in the western city. He is wealthy and upright, with no criminal record. Most importantly, after our investigation, we found that he is still a very passionate man. Crazy love. Yeah. His wife passed away due to illness 5 years ago, and since then, he has never married another woman. His relatives and friends all say he treats his wife well and is a very fond man. Anyway, the people around him have never spoken ill of him, they all say he is good. As Huang Shanshan said these words, a hint of envy appeared on her face, thinking to herself, how great it would be if she could also meet such a man who is so infatuated with her. Zhang Qian's face turned cold upon hearing this, and she looked down upon it with disdain. If it weren't for the eerie scene shown on TV last night and the pain she had experienced firsthand in her dream just now, she might have believed in the persona of a passionate man like Zhang Pe, a kind gentleman. Huang Shanshan didn't notice the change in Zhang Qian's expression and instead said, Qian, then you go back. If you get any clues, remember to tell me. Okay, I'll definitely tell you if I have any clues. Zhang Qian definitely agreed. Then the two said goodbye to each other. Huang Shanshan stayed behind to continue handling the aftermath of the scene. Zhang Qian, on the other hand, silently left the night market street and drove to her office to work. Halfway through, Zhang Qian's phone rang. She picked up her phone and found that the call was from a mental hospital. She answered the call. The third victim appeared, right. Zhang Qian was taken aback by what she thought was the call from the dean, but unexpectedly it was Wang Hao. I really can't figure it out. You're locked in a mental hospital ward, and the situation here hasn't been announced so quickly. How did you know about this? Zhang Qian finally spoke out the question that had been hidden in her heart for a long time. She admitted that Wang Hao's mental illness was too mysterious for her to use professional knowledge to understand this person. How did the third victim die? Wang Hao still did not answer and instead continued to inquire about the case. People use sticks to run up and down the body, put them on the grill, and make a barbecue like a roasted sucking pig or roasted baby pig. Wooden stick barbecue corresponds to the wood in the yin-yang and 5 elements, which is called wood exhaustion. Even if what you said is correct, the third victim Zhang Po's death method of Mujin has become a mystery, and they can't find anything, so they can only temporarily collect his body and clean up the scene. Zhang Qian did not deny Wang Hao's statement this time, but rather wanted to know what the way Mujin died was. Wang Hao's voice suddenly began to darken. No, there's a problem. I was actually misled, and there are even experts hidden behind it. Ah. What are you saying? Doodle doodle. Wang Haogan didn't explain to Zhang Qian and hung up the phone completely like a lunatic. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Strange Dreams and Curses. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Strange Dreams and Curses. Zhang Qian put down her phone, her face stiff and her eyebrows furrowed. From the information obtained from Wang Hao, it seems that this matter is not just as simple as the noodles look, but also has another party hidden behind it. Zhang Qian felt her head bigger and bigger as she thought about it. The appearance of the vengeful spirit had shattered her worldview. She thought Wang Hao could help her unravel the secret behind it, but instead, the mystery of Vern grew more and more. Returning to the psychological counseling center at work, Zhang Qianping regained her composure and took care of the accumulated work in her hands. These days, due to the situation on the night market street, she didn't have time to receive patients either. After organizing for over an hour, she finally took out a medical record book and called the phone number on it. The owner of this medical record book, named Su Qing, is a young girl in her 20s who is currently working as a cashier at a hotel in the western city. More than half a month ago, Su Qing came here to look for her and submitted a psychological medical record analysis. Afterwards, Zhang Qian was too busy and forgot about the little girl. Coincidentally, she was free today and wanted to take care of this patient first. The phone quickly answered and a rather sweet voice rang out. Hello, who is it? Is that Su Qing? I'm Zhang Qian from the Psychological Counseling Center. It's Dr. Zhang. I've been waiting for you for over half a month now. Why are you calling me now? Su Qing was clearly a bit angry. Zhang Qian quickly apologized. I'm sorry, Miss Su. I've been too busy lately, so I'll call you as soon as I'm free today. Are you free this afternoon? Don't wait for the afternoon, I'll come over right away. Su Qing replied and immediately hung up the phone. Zhang Qian put away her phone and continued to organize other patient information. About half an hour later, a delicate girl, standing around 1.6 meters tall, came to Zhang Qian's Psychological Counseling Center. She is exactly Su Qing. After the assistant approached to inquire, they immediately brought Su Qing to Zhang Qian's office. Psychologists like Zhang Qian usually have a room in their office dedicated to face-to-face and in-depth communication with patients. After Su Qing entered, Zhang Qian took her into the psychological counseling room. The two sat face to face, and Zhang Qian said with a smile. More than half a month ago, when you came to me, you said that you always have nightmares when you sleep at night. Now, let me ask you, what are the contents of your dreams? I dreamed of a big tree, and I stood in front of it like this, and then it started talking to me. What did the tree say? I can't hear clearly, anyway that tree is talking. Suqing's face was not very good, and when she talked about the strange dreams she often had, she felt lingering palpitations. Zhang Qian thought for a moment in her mind before using her professional knowledge to reply. Miss Su, psychologically speaking, trees represent the cycle of strong vitality and endless growth. I believe that if you have such a dream, it must be because you lack a sense of security in your heart and always have a sense of fear and unease. Am I right? Well, indeed, since my dad had an accident, I have been feeling very uneasy. I always feel like something is constantly staring at me, like it could kill me at any moment. What happened to your father? What made you so uneasy? Isn't it about the night market street? I'm so scared. Su Qing suddenly said this sentence. Zhang Qian's face immediately darkened, she sat up straight and no longer relaxed like before. She had no idea that she, as a patient, had something to do with the situation on the night market street. And most importantly, more than half a month ago, when Su Qing first came to her for a psychological analysis book, she did not mention the specific situation of her father to her. Realizing that something was wrong, Zhang Qian immediately stood up and asked. May I ask, what is your father's name and what happened on the night market street? Dr. Zhang, I said you must know that my father's name is Chen Lin. What? Your father is Chen Lin. Zhang Qian was puzzled, but of course, more surprised. She only realized now that Su Qing came to find her over half a month ago, while her father Chen Lin came to find her over a week ago. That is to say, the father and daughter came to find her in almost a week, with a different order. Suppressing the unpleasant premonition in her heart, Zhang Qian asked further. Why is your father's surname Chen, but your surname Su instead? My grandfather was adopted to the Chen family. His original surname was Su, so it's not as good as my generation now. Naturally, he will have to return to the family for 3 generations. So it's like this. Zhang Qian was relieved and convinced that Su Qing was not lying. As a qualified psychologist, it is natural to judge whether a patient has the possibility of lying based on their facial expressions. When Su Qing said this just now, she was very sincere and there was no possibility of lying. Su Qing opened up her conversation. Dr. Zhang, you know, my dad died so strangely, and I had been having nightmares before him, so I'm very scared now. You need to relax. Your various fears and anxieties are all because of the bizarre death of your father, which scared you. Next, you just need to calm down and work hard, and naturally you will get better. But these past few nights, I've been having nightmares about that big tree talking. Hello, let me recall what that big tree said and see if I can remember 1 or 2 words or something, so that I can help you analyze. Zhang Qian tentatively began to excavate. Dreaming at night is the result of neural activity in the brain, which is a subconscious activity deep in the mind. Deep exploration of the subconscious can often better identify the crux of psychological patients. Simply put, when people dream, they often have thoughts during the day and dreams at night. If they can't think of anything in their minds, they will continue to dwell on it. As long as these tangled points are dug out and sorted out, they can naturally bring healing to psychological patients. However, Zhang Qian still thought too simply. Just because of her professional knowledge, it is completely impractical for Su Qing. No, Su Qing lowered her head and thought carefully for a while. Suddenly, she looked up at Zhang Qian and said seriously. Although I couldn't hear what the big tree was saying in my dream, vaguely, I seemed to understand 2 words. Which 2 words? Curse. Su Qing spoke solemnly. Dr. Zhang, did I hit an evil spirit? If it were in the past, Zhang Qian would definitely have refuted the other party's belief in science, but recent experiences have shown her that the other party may have really fallen for evil. The other party is clearly closely related to this case, and she does not want her own arbitrariness to put the other party's life in danger. The curse is not within my scope of business. Miss Su, you may need to ask a professional to take a look. Zhang Qian thought for a moment and answered. How could you believe it? Su Qing looked shocked. During this period, she also consulted other psychologists, most of whom said that she had been under too much pressure recently and her nerves were tense, causing nightmares. No one believed in the curse. It seems that I really need to go to the temple to find someone to take a look at. Zhang Qian's answer strengthened Su Qing's judgment, and she made up her mind to find someone to take a look. If Miss Su trusts me, there's no need to look for it. My second grandfather is a Taoist, and he should be able to arrive in Xiqing this afternoon. Is that right? That's great. Su Qing became delighted as she had been troubled by this dream for too long. So, you go back to work first. I'll pick up my second grandfather at the airport this afternoon and then pick you up. We'll go to my house together and have my second grandfather analyze it for you slowly. Okay, that's settled then. I'll go back and wait for you first. Su Qing nodded and left happily. Zhang Qian looked at Su Qing's departing figure, and her smile dissipated, replaced by a solemn expression. She speculated that to unravel the true cause of death of Chen Lin, the first victim on the night market street, perhaps the key was on his daughter Su Qing. End of this chapter.